Let's jump right in, because today we are exploring something absolutely profound, the very architecture of human life. We're talking about the microscopic instruction manual that literally builds you, me, and everyone we know. And more specifically, we're going to look at what happens when that exact manual gets handed down from generation to generation.
So think about a master blueprint for a massive, complex skyscraper. It dictates where every single wire, every pipe, and every steel beam needs to go, right? Well, your DNA is exactly like that. Here's a wild fact for you. If you uncoiled all the DNA in your body, it would stretch to the sun and back dozens of times, no joke. But what happens when that massive blueprint of life has a typo? Just a tiny spelling mistake in a document of billions of letters? Well, instead of a faulty light switch in a building, that genetic typo can fundamentally change how a human body develops and functions.
Okay, let's dive into this. To get us all on exactly the same page, inherited diseases, which you'll also hear called genetic disorders, are basically conditions caused by changes or mutations in genes or chromosomes that are passed from parents to offspring. The absolutely crucial thing to remember here is that these tiny glitches are transmitted across generations, specifically through reproductive cells. It's a literal chain of information, just handed down through time.
Section 1. The Blueprint of Life. To really understand how all this happens, we need to leave the visible world behind for a second and zoom way into the microscopic level.
So how does this structural blueprint actually go wrong? It basically boils down to 4 primary ways. First up, we've got gene mutations. These are literal changes in the DNA sequence, kind of like swapping a single letter in a word. Second, chromosomal abnormalities. This is where whole chapters of the blueprint are missing, maybe there's extra pages or they're just completely rearranged. Third is defective gene expression, meaning, the code is perfectly fine, but the body just isn't reading it right. And finally, the direct inheritance of faulty alleles, which are basically just variations of a gene passed straight from mom or dad.
Section 2. Types of genetic glitches. Okay, we know the mechanisms, but how do medical professionals actually categorize these errors? It really all comes down to scope.
Now, what's really interesting here is how we can distill these highly complex categories into a pretty simple breakdown. Take the first type, single gene disorders. Conditions like cystic fibrosis are caused by a mutation in just one single gene. But if you look at chromosomal disorders like Down syndrome, now we're talking about massive structural or numerical abnormalities in entire chromosomes. Whole different scale. Then we've got multifactorial disorders, things like diabetes and heart disease, where multiple genes are basically interacting with your environment. And lastly, mitochondrial disorders, which specifically target the cell's tiny energy factories. So 4 distinct categories, 4 totally different ways the code can impact human health.
Section 3. Passing down the code. Because at the end of the day, a typo is really just a typo, until it gets copied. Let's look at the mechanics of inheritance.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the math of genetics actually works. On one side, you have autosomal dominant inheritance. In this scenario, it literally only takes one mutated gene from one parent to cause the disease. Huntington's disease is a classic example. The mutation is dominant, so it just overrides the healthy copy. But look at the flip side, autosomal recessive inheritance. For conditions like cystic fibrosis, you absolutely need 2 mutated genes, one from each parent. The crazy part? The parents are usually just carriers. They often have no idea they even hold that typo until their codes combine.
Now, there are 2 other fascinating pathways we definitely need to touch on. X-linked inheritance happens when the mutation sits specifically on the X chromosome. And because males only have one X chromosome, they are way more commonly affected by conditions like hemophilia. And then there's mitochondrial inheritance. This is super unique because it's passed exclusively down the maternal line, from mother to offspring, and it directly messes with the body's energy-producing systems.
Section 4. Detecting the unexpected. Let's zoom back out to the macro world and see how these microscopic glitches actually show up in human patients.
Because DNA directs literally everything in the human body, the symptoms of an inherited disease can impact basically any system you can think of. The effects are incredibly wide-ranging. We're talking developmental delays, major physical and organ abnormalities, profound metabolic or neurological disorders, and immune deficiencies. The symptoms are honestly as varied as the genetic code itself.
Let's move to the diagnostic journey and see how this builds a logical sequence for medical detectives. Step 1 is the clinical exam. This relies heavily on family history and physical symptoms, but then we get into the high-tech stuff. Step 2 is genetic testing, using actual, literal DNA sequencing. Step 3 is prenatal testing. Doctors use amazing techniques like non-invasive prenatal testing to check the blueprint before a baby is even born. And finally, step 4 is newborn screening, which catches metabolic and genetic disorders in those crucial first days of life.
But look, receiving a genetic diagnosis is not just about staring at raw data on a screen. It's a profound, often scary life event. And this highlights the deeply human element of medicine. Genetic counselors don't just assess risk and interpret those super complex test results. They are there to guide families through incredibly difficult reproductive decisions. They provide vital emotional support. They're essentially helping people navigate the heavy emotional weight of their own biology.
For decades, that was pretty much the end of the line. We could identify the disease, track it, counsel the family, but we were essentially just reading the typos. The monumental question facing modern science right now is this: we can read them, but can we rewrite them?
Section 5. Rewriting the future. This is where the whole narrative pivots from the heavy burden of genetic diseases to the incredible, game-changing hope of modern biotechnology. Just look at the medical arsenal we have available today. Medications and lifestyle management are still vital, for sure, but they mostly just manage the symptoms. Enzyme replacement therapy and stem cell transplants step it up a notch, actually treating the underlying mechanisms of metabolic and blood disorders. But at the absolute cutting edge of medicine is gene therapy. This isn't just managing a symptom. This aims straight at the root cause by actively replacing or correcting the defective gene itself.
So the crucial point in this whole story is CRISPR. This is a revolutionary biotech tool you've probably heard about in the news, and it functions a lot like a molecular word processor. Scientists can literally search for a specific typo in the DNA sequence, hit backspace to erase it, and write in the correct genetic code. We are actively moving from just treating the symptoms of inherited diseases to fundamentally correcting the human blueprint.
And the pace of innovation here is just absolutely staggering. Beyond CRISPR, whole genome sequencing is becoming faster and way cheaper. We're seeing amazing RNA-based therapies hit the mainstream. We are officially entering the era of precision medicine, where your treatments are tailored to your specific, unique genetic makeup. And get this, artificial intelligence is now supercharging genetic diagnosis, finding hidden patterns in the code that human eyes could literally never catch.
But, we do have to stay grounded for a second. While the science is incredibly exciting, there are massive real-world hurdles. Many inherited diseases still have absolutely no cure. The interaction between our genes and our environment, it's maddeningly complex. We're also grappling with some very intense ethical concerns around genetic testing, and practically speaking, the sky-high cost of these advanced therapies makes global access a really serious challenge today.
Still, we are literally standing on the edge of a new frontier. With future prospects pointing toward early embryo genetic correction and fully personalized genome treatments, we have to ask ourselves, what actually happens when we finally fully master the blueprint of life? It is a thrilling, heavy question to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you next time.